Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Talk Criterion, where we'll be taking a look at forthcoming releases and upgrades in the Criterion Collection. And on our last edition for the month of June, we take a look at David Lynch's Blue Velvet.
She wore blue velvet, bluer than velvet.
David Lynch is a long-standing contributor to the Criterion Collection. He has multiple titles in the collection: his first film Eraserhead, The Elephant Man, Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, Inland Empire, as well as two documentaries about the man himself. That's David Lynch, The Art Life, not of course to mention the Janus contemporary release, Lynch Oz. But Blue Velvet definitely sits out on its own. The screenplay of Blue Velvet had been passed round multiple times in the late 1970s and early 1980s, with several major film studios declining it due to its strong sexual and violent content. After the box office failure of his 1984 film Dune, Lynch made attempts at developing a more personal story, somewhat characteristic of the surrealist style displayed in his first film Eraserhead from 1977. The independent studio De Laurentiis Entertainment Group, owned at the time by Italian film producer Dino De Laurentiis, agreed to finance and produce the film. After he completed The Elephant Man in 1980, David Lynch met producer Richard Roth over coffee. Now, Roth had read and enjoyed Lynch's Ronnie Rocket script, but did not think it was something that he wanted to produce. He asked Lynch if the filmmaker had any other scripts in mind, but the director only had ideas. Roth loved the ideas and asked Lynch to write a treatment. So he went home and thought of the ear in the field. Production was announced in August of 1984, and Lynch ended up writing two more drafts before he was satisfied with the script of the film itself. Now, the cast of Blue Velvet includes several then relatively unknown actors. Lynch met Isabella Rossellini at a restaurant and offered her the role of Dorothy Valance. Helen Mirren had been Lynch's first choice for that role. Rossellini had gained some exposure before the film for her Lancôme ads in the early 1980s, and for being, of course, the daughter of actress Ingrid Bergman and director Roberto Rossellini. Kyle Maclachlan had played the central role in Lynch's critical and commercial failure Dune from 1984. That was a science fiction epic based on the novel of the same name by James Herbert. Maclachlan later became a recurring collaborator with David Lynch. And Dennis Hopper was the best known actor in the film, having directed and starred in Easy Rider in 1969. Hopper was said to be Lynch's third choice. Michael Ironside had also been in the frame, but Hopper said that Frank was written with him in mind, and he accepted the role, reportedly having said, "I've got to play Frank. I am Frank." And Harry Dean Stanton and Steven Berkoff were also approached about the role of Frank, but they both turned it down because of the violent content in the film. Laura Dern at the time was only 18 years old, but she was cast as Sandy after several already successful actresses also turned that role down, among one being Molly Ringwald. Blue Velvet is surprisingly both an enjoyable and relatively conventional David Lynch film. It is essentially a classic noir story, quite similar in fact to Chinatown. The entire story is told from the perspective of the character of Jeffrey. He's a young man returned home from school to visit his sick father, and like Chinatown, the protagonist is in every scene, even fading to black when he gets knocked out in an altercation. And also like Chinatown, the leading man is talented enough to carry the film. The first 40 minutes of the movie feels like a typical wholesome 80s teen mystery. The classic Americana imagery also makes it seem almost like a John Hughes film. The mystery Jeffrey falls into involves a severed ear, a sultry lounge singer, corrupt cops, and a sadistic drug lord with serious mommy issues. Dennis Hopper is delightfully chaotic, of course, in the latter role. He serves as an outlet for some classic Lynchian kookiness without ever feeling forced. And once he's introduced after the film's first act, the tone of the film shifts into more of a dark, erotic thriller. The storyline is also not what it initially appears to be, although there is a clue early on in the film where Lynch is heading. Blue Velvet opens with images exported from the American dream itself. Perfect little houses with white picket fences and impeccably manicured yards. And now a man collapses while he's watering his lawn, and the camera, after following him to the ground, burrows into it, parting the blades of grass to reveal a colony of swarming bugs. Now the message here is very clear. Its perfection often hides deeply rooted rot. Dreams can easily turn into nightmares. Corruption is everywhere, even in places that seem immune to it. Now these themes and others about the pernicious influence of evil are explored in some depth throughout Blue Velvet. And for a while, Blue Velvet appears to be a mystery, and with such all-American clean-cut detectives, it could be mistaken for something out of the Hardy Boys Nancy Drew series. But as much as Jeffrey and Sandy might be at home in a simplistic adolescent story, Dorothy and Frank are film noir refugees, the femme fatale and the terrifying killer. And by cross-pollinating these two genres, Lynch is able to satirise Americana itself while making a grim statement about human nature. Now the movie consists of humour, albeit the blackest sort, but the plot is relatively uncluttered, and there are numerous examples of the offbeat stylistic quirkiness for which many, of course, have come to know the director. It's intentionally difficult, though, to pinpoint the time frame in which Blue Velvet is actually set. Now, there are some clues which indicate that events may be happening in contemporary or near contemporary times, for instance, the early 1980s. Others, such as the abundance of older cars, the styles of clothing and hair, for instance, and the use of Bobby Vinton's song Blue Velvet, which evoke an earlier era, perhaps indeed the 1950s or even early 1960s. Now, by juxtaposing the 1980s with the 50s, David Lynch takes the movie out of time, ensuring that it will never become dated. And he also manages to remind us that while many things have changed since the Father Knows Best generation, the essence of humanity itself has remained constant. Now, other movies have argued the same thing, of course, but they generally do so from a more positive perspective than Blue Velvet. Lynch supplants nobility with depravity. Now, the four main actors could not be more perfectly chosen for their respective roles. Kyle Maclachlan, who would of course go on to play Agent Cooper in Twin Peaks, Fire Walk With Me, is the perfect clean-cut boy. Maclachlan brings a sense of innocence to the part, and that serves him well. And because of that quality, we can identify with Jeffrey as he begins his downward spiral into Dorothy and Frank's hellishly dark world. Laura Dern portrays the good girl, prim, proper, and much different from her character that she played in Lynch's Wild at Heart. Isabella Rossellini captures the full breadth of Dorothy's complex personality, her vulnerability and degeneracy, her desperation and longing, her hatred of Frank, and need for him at the same time. And the role demands much of her that goes beyond the nudity. Finally, there's Dennis Hopper, who, in a lifetime of playing vicious creatures, has never essayed one quite as sinister and purely evil as Frank, one of the most horrific villains ever to grace the silver screen. And there's nothing redeemable about this character. Hopper recognises that, and he embraces it as only he can. Other casting in the film includes Dean Stockwell as Ben, George Dickerson as Detective Williams, Priscilla Pointer as Mrs. Beaumont, Frances Bay as Aunt Barbara, Jack Harvey as Mr. Beaumont, Ken Stovitz as Mike, and Brad Dourif as Raymond. And there's a juxtaposition in tone that is a big part of the film's theme. Blue Velvet really is a film about dichotomies. It's about two visions of small town America, one wholesome and one decadent. And it's about two different romantic relationships, one innocent and trusting the other, and one violent and precarious. Now, the former relationship involves Jeffrey and younger high school girl named Sally, played splendidly, of course, by Laura Dern. And the way she very gradually breaks up with her boyfriend Mike in the film in favour of Jeffrey is one of the funniest elements, I think, in the film. And the other relationship, of course, is between Jeffrey and Dorothy. Now, the femme fatale lounge singer instigates a sexual relationship with Jeffrey that includes knives and physical violence. Yet for all the dualities and evolving mysteries, Blue Velvet is still a refreshingly simple story with an ending so syrupy that it feels tongue-in-cheek. And the use of the music, of course, is also really strong. The central score is by Angelo Badalamenti, and of course you'll be hard-pressed not to find yourself humming to In Dreams, the song from Roy Orbison, days after watching the film. If you're sceptical of Lynch's ability to tell a coherent story, watch Blue Velvet, and you will be pleasantly surprised. And Blue Velvet already has a place in the Criterion Collection, and we now receive a 4K UHD upgrade of the film, complete with the same original special features, and they are a 4K digital restoration with 5.1 surround DTS HD surround soundtrack, and that's supervised and approved by director David Lynch. One 4K UHD disc of the film, presented in Dolby Vision HDR, and one Blu-ray with the film and these special features. We have the lost footage, 53 minutes of deleted scenes, and alternate takes assembled by David Lynch. Blue Velvet Revisited, a feature-length meditation on the making of the movie by Peter Bratz, filmed on set during the production. Mysteries of Love, a 70-minute documentary from 2002 on the making of the film. Interview from 2017 with composer Angelo Badalamenti. It's a Strange World, the filming of Blue Velvet. That's a 2019 documentary featuring interviews with crew members and visits to the shooting locations. We have David Lynch reading from Room to Dream, his 2018 book that he co-authored with Christine McKenna. And there's excerpts by McKenna from Room to Dream. And the cover art is the same as it was before. It's by Fred Davis. With intense performances and hauntingly powerful scenes and images, Blue Velvet is an unforgettable vision of innocence lost and one of the most influential American films of the late 20th century. And Blue Velvet from 1986 has a running time of 120 minutes, and it comes in a 2:3:5:1 aspect ratio, and it releases on Tuesday the 25th of June with existing spine number 977. And of course, our stateside viewers can now enjoy the 50% off July Barnes & Noble sale. And we'll be here with our next edition. And we'll be looking to our next featured release. And that will be Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid in 4K UHD. From me, it's goodbye. And above all, good Criterion viewing.